So this is from Angeline. And she says, I get seriously bloated, gassy, constipation, and rotten smell in my nose coming from the stomach through the mouth when I eat beans, peanuts, and eggs. She says this usually happens 1 hour after eating them. She says it's a terrible feeling, I would imagine. She says, unfortunately, those are the only affordable kinds of proteins available in Africa, and I'm afraid of becoming malnourished. What's the cheapest supplement I can take to be able to tolerate the above proteins? Thank you so much.
Well, that's really an interesting and specific question. Thank you for that. The first thing to identify, is it just a digestive problem, or has it progressed because it's been there long enough to activate your immune system? You know, the immune system is the armed forces. It's just there to protect you. There's an Army, a Navy, an Air Force, a Marines, a Coast Guard. And so if you've activated your immune system to protect you from those foods, you really can't eat those foods right now, because the activated immune system, meaning antibodies to those specific foods, if you have antibodies to those specific foods, the problem is not that you've got elevated antibodies to beans. Who cares if you've got a bunch of antibodies in your bloodstream? Yes, they're inflammatory. They create inflammation because those antibodies are firing a chemical bullet called a cytokine to attack and destroy whatever food they've been programmed to go after. Yeah, so there's some inflammation with that. But arguably, more importantly, how do the antibodies know what food to attack? And it's a amino acid sequence in that food, the protein structure of that food. There's particular amino acid sequences. For example, in wheat, there are 62 different amino acid sequences that have been identified that your immune system can attack. Not just one, 62. And it depends on the food, but there are multiple amino acid sequences. Okay, so, well, if you think of antibodies as special forces, they're no nonsense. These guys know exactly what they're doing when they go out into your bloodstream. Your bloodstream is just a highway. There's no lanes of traffic. Everything's bouncing around, hitting each other like bumper cars all the time. How do the antibodies bumping around know to attack beans or gluten? How do they know to do that? They're programmed to go after a very specific amino acid sequence. I call it an orange vest. So the antibodies are in the bloodstream looking for orange vests. Oh, over there, boom. Oh, over there, boom. Over there, boom. And they're firing their chemical bullets, cytokines, at orange vests. Great. That's what it's supposed to do to protect you. The problem is the amino acid sequence, the orange vest, that your antibody has been programmed to go after is also the same or very similar amino acid sequence to the tissues of your body, to your thyroid, to myelin basic protein, to your cerebellum, to the cartilage of your joints. So if the amino acid sequence, the orange vest of beans that your immune system is going after to attack the beans and get rid of them, happens to be the amino acid sequence of the cartilage of your joints, then the antibodies going after the beans will attack your joints. And that's called molecular mimicry. That's why wheat is such a problem, is because there are many, many, many different human tissues that have very similar amino acid sequences to different proteins of wheat. That's why wheat can cause MS. Wheat can cause Hashimoto's. Wheat sensitivity can cause rheumatoid arthritis. Wheat sensitivity can cause psoriasis. Wheat sensitivity can cause vitiligo. Wheat sensitivity can cause alopecia. Just read the science. When you read the science and you see all the studies of the association of wheat or gluten with alopecia, you realize that, wow, sometimes if I have a wheat sensitivity, if my genetic vulnerability is such, I'm vulnerable to developing alopecia. Or if my genetic vulnerability is such, I'm vulnerable to developing rheumatoid. Or if my genetic vulnerability is such, I'm vulnerable to developing thyroid disease. And it's not just your genetic vulnerability, there's two factors: your genetics, that I was just referring to, and your antecedents, how you've lived your life so far. For example, if you eat tuna fish quite regularly, you got mercury poisoning. It's no question now, almost all the tuna in the world is high in mercury. Well, it tastes so good, so I only eat it once in a while. Well, we'll put that on your tombstone. He only ate it once in a while. If you have high levels of mercury in your body, you really can't be exposed to any more mercury right now. So it's not the antibodies to the food that's the problem. It's that the antibodies via molecular mimicry will go after your own tissue, and that's the development of autoimmune diseases. And it doesn't matter. It's MS, it's psoriasis, it's rheumatoid, it doesn't matter. It just depends on your genetics and your antecedents. But now, specific to your question, what inexpensive supplements can I take to deal with this? Well, there is no supplement that will negate an immune response. So that's why I started with that. If you're having an immune response, you need to avoid exposure to those foods. And the only way you know is by doing testing. That's the only way to know. You can certainly stop eating those foods completely and see if you feel better. And if you do, then you can try one food at a time and see if your symptoms come back. That's called an elimination diet. The problem with the elimination diet is that the symptoms may not come back at low levels of exposure, but the antibodies absolutely come back at low levels of exposure. With wheat, it's nanogram amounts of wheat will activate the antibodies. And a nanogram is a billionth of a gram. That's all it takes. So you can't determine, well, I feel fine when I eat just red beans every 4 days. I don't get that bad breath and I don't get all this, so I'm fine. I can eat it every 4 days. Well, you can reduce the symptoms by that line of thinking, perhaps. But if you're making the antibodies, you will make the antibodies anytime you're exposed. And when you produce antibodies, usually, depending on the food, the antibodies will last anywhere from 2 to 4 months from one exposure, 2 to 4 months, killing off your thyroid, killing off your thyroid, killing off your thyroid with the elevated antibodies to thyroid, if that's where your genetic and antecedent vulnerability is to via molecular mimicry. But in terms of the supplement, because your question was about the supplement, digestive enzymes, really strong digestive enzymes. You always have to include hydrochloric acid in that because it's called the 40-40 rule. And there's a really good book that everyone should read. It's on Amazon. It's a simple 100-page, large print kind of book. It's not really geeky, by my friend, Dr. Jonathan Wright. And he's an excellent writer. And the book is called Why Hydrochloric Acid is Good for You. And pretty direct and straightforward. And but once you read that book, you'll take hydrochloric acid the rest of your life. You'll understand how it's a primary trigger to the whole digestive efficiency process. So in terms of what supplements to take, hydrochloric acid, pancreatic enzymes, and probably some bile would be great to help reduce the poor digestive response to exposure to those foods. But once again, it doesn't at all address the immune response to those foods.